Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. The board will now reconvene to open session and report out anything from the closed session. Regarding item 3.1, the Public Employee Performance Evaluation, Superintendent's Evaluation, Government Code Section 54957, there is nothing to report. Regarding Section 3.2, Public Employee Discipline Dismissal, Release, Government Code Section 54957, there is nothing to report. Regarding agenda item 3.3, update on negotiations with NHUSD bargaining units, conference with legal counsel, Government Code Section 3549.1, there is nothing to report. Agenda item 3.4, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant of paragraph 2 of subdivision D of section 54956.9. One case item, there is nothing to report. Moving on to the procedural items, may I have our students lead us into a pledge of allegiance, please?
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Someday.
Thank you. Roll call, please. Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Next item is the approval of the agenda. May I have a motion and a second to approve tonight's agenda as presented?
So move.
Discussion?
None.
Roll call, please. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next section is the information items. We have a comprehensive energy project, CEP updates. Ms. Heldman? Is Ms. Heldman in? Oh, there you are.
Good evening, Superintendent Smith and members of the board. Annette Heldman, I'm your Chief Business Officer. So about 4 years, actually 5 years ago, we did an energy audit as part of Prop 39. Last fall, we actually started the process in the preliminary steps in terms of implementing the findings from that audit. Now, we did an RFP, and we ultimately, based on the results of those RFP, we selected and engaged via a letter of intent with Sizerco, which is one of the proposals that we received. At this point in time, from the last time that we presented this to you, the next steps were to do another audit, to update that audit in order for us to move forward. So I will be inviting Tim Holmes from Kenwood Energy. Kenwood Energy has also assisted us in the district-wide solar project in the last 2 or 3 years to bring you up to speed in terms of the result of the recent audit that we did. This is not an action item, it's information item, but from this report, at some point we will, what we are asking for is direction from the board in terms of the scope of this next phase in this process of our comprehensive energy project. So I'll be calling Tim Holmes. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's good to be back. Let's see, do I have control of this with this one? Try the other way. Okay, so this slide here that you're looking at is actually an exact duplicate of a slide I showed you last time I was here a few months ago. We were implementing and trying to develop a comprehensive energy project. Often those projects result in positive returns on investment. Sometimes they are neutral returns on investment, and sometimes they result in projects that have energy savings, but a district will want to increase the scope that includes projects that don't have energy savings, so technically they don't pay for themselves. I'm just reminding you where we were. And we had also said that our next steps were for Sizerco to complete a comprehensive energy audit and then to finalize the scope. And that's actually where we are now, is we are in the process of finalizing the scope of the comprehensive energy project. So this is what Sizer Co. found during their comprehensive audit, is that the operating hours for your school district, for these schools, are lower than are what is typical for a school district. The potential energy savings are relatively low and lower than they are for a typical school district. Paraphrasing all that, what it means is that your staff is doing a really good job of controlling your schools, ensuring that lights are off, HVAC equipment's not operating on weekends, et cetera, et cetera. So you have relatively low energy costs, although it may not seem that way because energy is expensive. Some of the HVAC equipment out there is old, but it's not really a problem. So we found that, but we also found that some of it's old and is a problem. And then we also found, more than what we would have expected, is that the control systems are relatively old and are a problem. So Sizer Co. priced the cost of implementing the projects that they identified at the district, and also quantified the energy savings. So starting at that top, there's a red arrow there, and that very top row is the controls replacement. And the cost of that is estimated at almost $1.4 million. That was something we did not expect when we entered into this project. So the cost is higher than we expected it to be. Also notice that right next to that number on the left, it says 0 energy savings. The reason that's 0 is because in this industry, there's no accepted way to quantify energy savings related to controls. But as I said before, the reason that your energy costs are relatively low is because the district controls its equipment very well, and you have relatively low energy costs. So there truly are savings from those controls. It's just there's no accepted way to quantify those. The HVAC portion of it, that next arrow where you see the, I don't think I did that, the next arrow shows that the simple payback for the HVAC equipment is 129 years. HVAC equipment has an expected life of 20 to 25 years. Typically, I have seen that number. We don't expect HVAC equipment to pay for itself, but I typically see that in the 50-year range, not the 130-year range. So again, it's pointing to the fact that that equipment doesn't operate very much, and that's why the payback is very long. Also, way to the right, that only accounts for 133 units, and the district has close to 1,000 units in all of its schools, and more than 133 of them are problems. Also notice that on the total row down at the bottom, is that if you were to implement all of these projects, there is quite a bit of savings there. The problem is the budget's about $5 million, and we've identified nearly $9 million worth of projects. There are fewer HVAC units than we had hoped for. The controls costs are higher than we had expected, and I think I've said everything else on that slide, so I'll move to the next one. So here's where we are, and this is the direction we are looking for from the board. We reevaluated the project based on the budget and focusing on just HVAC equipment and controls. So there was about a $5 million budget. If we put all of that money into HVAC equipment and controls, we can replace 195 units approximately. We still have to finalize this comprehensive energy project, but we can replace 195 units. We can replace 330 of the control systems, which are a problem as well. So we'd like you to consider that as a standalone project. And then also for consideration is developing an energy project that is focused specifically on saving energy. And depending on how we moved forward, that project could be anywhere between $2 million and $4 million and could save $300,000 to $550,000. And that's really the end of my presentation. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have, and we don't we assume that you will need some time to think about the information that's been presented to you, and we're not really looking for direction at this moment. But if you have any, we'd love to hear it. So.
Sure, thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
So on the original slide, under impacted equipment, there's 33 HVAC units.
Yeah, that's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning.
Okay,
Sorry.
and then with the project direction for consideration, 195 units would be repaired?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah, and it was 133, and we can increase it to 195.
Thank you.
Good question.
So maybe before it comes to the board, maybe if we can get a kind of a table that's updated with what you took out, just so we can compare basically what the recommendation is versus what the budgeted amount for $5 million would be. You know what I mean?
I think so. And if you can, again, if I don't understand it, you can make sure that Annette does, and we'll work with Annette and staff to make sure that you get what you want.
Basically, the table that's up there right now, you can get a version of the
Okay.
kind of the amended, like what are some things that you're
with just the
striking?
controls and the HVAC equipment. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other further questions? This is an information item, so no action is needed. Thank you very much. So we'll wait for that report.
Thank you.
Okay, the next information item we have is the items from the board and superintendent. We'll start with Jocelyn.
So Logan had their annual Powder Puff game last Friday. Seniors won 21-0. Puente program is hosting a baile this Friday with live music. Tomorrow, the Student Advisory Board will be having a student-run discussion on school safety with administration, teachers, CSTs, and other students. Students have also voiced strong opinions about a potential strike and how detrimental it would be to have teachers strike this late in the school year. Many students are also wondering if the 3 new assistant superintendents would receive a pay increase and not teachers. And that is all to report.
Okay, so my daughter played against your team. She was the kicker, and it was a battle of kicks. Let's just put it that way. All right, so there's that. Just a reminder to the board, I'll be out May the week of the May 21st meeting. I'll be dialing from travel. Just wanted to kind of make the board aware again. Other than that, that's what I had.
Thank you. Member Wong?
Yes, I have nothing to report at this time, and the same things. And May 21st, I probably am.
Okay.
Yes, I mean I will work in my schedule now. Yeah.
Thank you. Member Chima?
Not much to report. I'm glad that we are over with the hiring of the superintendent that kept us busy, and welcome to the new superintendent here in the office. Thank you.
Okay. Member Candace?
Nothing.
All right. For me, I just wanted to thank the board and the stakeholder, the community group that we had here for 2 days, Friday and Saturday, 2 weekends ago, really working diligently on the superintendent search process. So I just want to thank them from the bottom of my heart for taking the time out and getting the job done. So thank you. And I will yield my time after that.
I have nothing.
Thank you. So moving on to the next section, which is the public comments. Are there any visitors? Are there any speakers on the topics?
Tonight.
13, you said?
13. I think we have
Okay.
5 or 6 of items not on the agenda.
Okay. Well, since we have a smaller group, we can go ahead and allot 2 minutes per speaker. But I would like to remind you that there are no sharing of minutes. And then I ask that you please be prepared to speak when your turn is up, or your name is called out, and that you are respectful of other people's time. I know in the past we had many speakers that went way over, and I appreciate it if you can just keep it to your 2-minute time. So with that.
Thank you. First speaker is Sehul Sony, and after Sehul Sony will be Sheryl Perez.
Good evening, Board of Directors, Superintendent, teachers, parents, community members, and students. So I'm here because I thought there was an issue that needed to be discussed. I keep hearing about in our school system where teachers are getting laid off. However, I couldn't even find that topic on the agenda, so it seems it's not on the agenda. It concerns me that there are these kinds of issues occurring in our New Haven School District. I am new to the community. We are a generation of parents where my kids are just entering the school system. And what is the bigger picture here? I come from types of parents, we have friends and families who have refused to come into Union City when they look for schools and new houses because they believe that there are better schools in other cities like Fremont, East Bay, Hayward, Newark, or even Cupertino, Santa Clara, and Union City does not fall into that category. I refuse to believe their arguments, the ratings that they perceive that meant that their schools are better and ours are not. I put my faith in this community thinking that we as a community can bring the standards higher. However, with the issues that we are laying off teachers and increasing the ratio from 30 to 1, do you think that is the best approach? What can we do together? What are the real issues that need to be discussed when we say there is less funding coming in? There are lesser admissions or enrollments happening each year. Please tell us what we can do together to bring our standards higher. And I have friends who I fight and have this debate actively, and I want to prove them wrong. So please, thank you and help us.
Thank you. Next speaker is Sheryl Perez. After Sheryl Perez is Don Heinsohn.
My name is Sheryl Perez, and I've been teaching at Logan for 30 years. Teaching at Logan has changed considerably in those 30 years. One of them is class size. I recall we had to have a letter stating the reason from administration if our classes exceeded 32 students. Now, if we have a class of 36, it's considered small. I currently have 2 classes of 40 and above in a foreign language class where students give frequent presentations. 40 students in a class really affects student learning, not to mention the extra correcting that we have to do at home. One of those classes that has 40 students, I also have in that class, included in that number, 10 special needs students. So I'm having to make accommodations for them as well, from critical living skills to 504 to resource students. That's not mentioning the behavior students. Every year we're dealing with more and more stressed out and depressed students. That applies to teachers as well. It seems the demands to develop and implement new strategies and policies increases every year. As you know, the cost of living, especially in this area, has increased. Class size has increased. Stress has increased. Demands have increased. Unfortunately, our salary has not increased to match that. I believe that you are here because you really care about our students. What's happening is not at the best interest of our students. The last time I spoke to you up here, I gave each of you a little magnifying glass as a reminder to look for a way to make this work. Please find a way to make this work for our students, for our teachers. Don't give up in finding a solution to this, because I know us teachers will not be giving up.
Next speaker is Don Heinsohn. After Don Heinsohn will be Terry Groenwald.
I think everybody knows that we just came out of fact-finding. I thought I'd share a few facts with the community. I wish I could think that anybody up here was listening to us. This is the percentage of New Haven School District's budget that goes to administration. Do you see it going up consistently? 2015-16 is a big year for me. The district got $14 million new dollars. Do you know what they did with it? They increased spending on administration from 7.2 to $10.2 million in 1 year. How will I go to Sacramento and ask Sacramento to send us more money when we get more money and it goes to the management class in this district? Here's the amount of money that the district spends on teachers. Do you see that it's going down every single year? I want the people and community of Union City, if there's anybody in the sound of my voice watching this, please consider running for the school board, because this school board thinks that this and this is appropriate, and it is not. Here's how we compare to other districts. We are only number 2 in the percentage spending to administration. Number 1 is Oakland. If there's a more dysfunctional administration in this state, tell me where it is. But we're number 2. We're better than everybody else at blowing money on administrators. Here's our salary schedule adjusted for out-of-pocket costs and the length of time it gets to the top. We're not number 1. We're not even in the middle. We're down here somewhere. We are not the highest paid teachers in this county. Here are the number of students per. When Ronald Reagan was president, I met Tommy Lindsay, and I've been involved with the debate program here ever since, 32 years, sometimes as a competitor. The community needs to know that that program has done more for this district than any other program, and this school board and this management class laid off half the coaching staff. I'm going to the state tournament with a coaching staff that's got a pink slip. You need to be pink slipped.
Next speaker is Terry Groenwald. After Terry Groenwald is Debbie Hughes.
Good evening. I'd really like to see those infographics put on our district website. Good evening, I'm Terry Groenwald. I find it ironic that we have 2 middle schools named for the 3 great union leaders, Cesar Chavez, Larry Itliong, and Philip Vera Cruz. Union City has a cherished history of unionism. Our district proudly unveiled these 2 schools' name changes in the early 90s for CCMS and more recently for IVC. It seems like our district can embrace the history of unionism in Union City, but not the current union activism that's happening. The irony is not lost on me and so many others. Of course, I'm not suggesting that our struggle to get a fair and equitable contract is equivalent to the struggle farm workers engaged in to get better wages and working conditions and to be treated with the dignity that all humans deserve. But their struggle, and all union struggles, do have to do with being seen, being heard, being recognized for our worth as human beings, being treated as equal partners around the bargaining table. Our union represents us. There was a time when it really felt like we had a partnership with the district and were working towards common goals that went beyond simply providing a stellar education to our students. But now we are no longer seen as equal partners. There is a hierarchy here, and we have slipped several rungs down the ladder. Board members, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. You have oversight over this administration. Demand that we, the union, be treated as equal players in this district. Why do you simply accept the district's position that there isn't money for us, but there's plenty of money for them, including the new superintendent? We are tired of being the bottom. We are tired of being at the bottom of the ladder. We are the worker bees of this district. We do the heavy lifting. Our district could survive without the top administrators for a time. Our district can't survive even a day without its teachers. Thank you.
Next speaker is Debbie Hughes. After Debbie Hughes will be Lisa Rodriguez.
Hi again. I'm back. I personally really like all of the district administrators that I have met and worked with. They care about doing their jobs well. They have visions and goals for their departments and the district as a whole, as well as strategies to reach them. Many have advanced degrees, and many have been classroom teachers. However, it is important to note that teachers also care about doing our jobs well. Our passion and compassion have been eloquently described to you innumerable times before. In addition, many of us have advanced degrees, and many of us also have decades of experience. It is also important to understand that we teachers have visions, goals, and strategies too, but ours are not merely for the department or district. We have visions for our own professional teaching practice, goals for our classes, and multiple goals and strategies to reach them for each individual student. Added up per teacher, those goals and those strategies reach into the hundreds that we focus on every single day. What's more, we have a different set of hundreds of goals and hundreds of strategies to reach them every single year, because the turnover rate of the people for whom we are responsible is 100%. So the obvious question becomes, since we have equitable education, equitable, if not more, experience at our jobs, undeniably equitable dedication, and equitable, if not more, direct responsibility for our students, and in fact manage and implement a great majority of the district's goals, why are we valued at only 1/3 the worth of an administrator because we have chosen to stay in our classrooms with our students? I really like those board members that I have met and worked with, and I know that you care about doing your jobs well. So if you care about these goals that are laid out, shouldn't the budget reflect those goals? The decisions before you today and in the near future are ones that you can make to support those established goals of the district by equitably paying our teachers. Thank you.
Next speaker is Lisa Rodriguez. After Lisa Rodriguez is Greg Snelling.
Good evening, board, students, superintendent, and now assistant superintendents. Giving 0 to our teachers basically means, and classified, basically means they're actually taking a pay cut. Think about it. COLA, insurance, everything goes up, yet they're getting nothing. Now keep screaming, there's no money, we have no money. Okay, however, we were able to give 3 new, contracts, and Orlando, you did speak to that earlier, that they're not really contracts, that it's they're step increases, but I still stand by my email that I responded back. Yes, it is an increase. No matter how it's sugar-coated, it is, because you had the responsibility and the ability to vote no. Give the title what it is. It doesn't matter, but they do not need an increase. What does it look like to us, your community, your teachers, when you're saying we cannot give, there's nothing else to give, yet others are receiving the golden ticket? Now, with that said, future, moving forward, you've got now, hopefully this will kind of, the teachers will get something, but guess what? All the administrators are going to get the same thing. They are going to get raises on top of what they're already getting. Board, I look to you and I tell you, yes, the superintendent is your employee, but guess what? You work for us. And you will have to respond and answer to this, because as a community member and a shareholder in this district, we are not happy. We want equity for our teachers and our classified. Thank you.
Last speaker on items not on the agenda is Greg Snelling.
Good evening. So I looked at the new contracts, and from my perspective, it appears that maybe you're being a little bit more egalitarian in the structure. It appears that they only get what we get rather than a step and column. So it's nice that you're not giving double raises to people who make 3 times the salary of a starting teacher. I think we have a bit of a problem here is because I think there's a problem with credibility. Last year, we started the year with a 0% salary increase, and you budgeted $63.1 million for NHTA bargaining unit. At the end of the year, we settled for something that I think cost you about $1.6 million. At the end of the year, you still spent $1.4 million less than you had originally budgeted.
And $12 million on top of that at the end.
That is a $3 million offset. Additionally, if you look at your adopted budget to your unaudited actuals and your second interim to your unaudited actuals, the adopted budget is more accurate than your mid-year projections of end of year. Your adopted budget misses each year, ends up being about $4.6 million more favorable, and at second interim, you end up being $5.3 million more favorable. It just seems some really odd things going on with the budget. So, in speaking to reserves, I don't know what your opinion of reserves are. I think they're evil. Okay, I know there's some state mandated requirements, but that money is effectively money that cannot be spent. Think of not just in our district, but statewide, how much money is sitting there not benefiting anybody. And hopefully you are aware, because CT is aware, and somebody has mentioned it, that the on behalf cost that the state is passing through us, this pseudo cost, is counted as expenditures, and you're required to keep reserves on that. The legislation needs to change, because that on behalf cost is forcing you to keep over $640,000 in reserves. Just that thing alone. So I hope the California School Boards is doing something like CTA is. Thank you.
That was the last speaker of topics not on the agenda.
Are there any topics on the agenda?
Yes. First speaker of topics on the agenda, Sean English, and after Sean English, Colleen Hayslett.
Hi, good evening, board members. My name is Sean English. I am an 18-year veteran. I have spent the last 5 years in New Haven Unified, but before that, I was a teacher in San Leandro, where I grew up. So you can imagine my surprise when I heard that the potential new superintendent that has been named is a name that actually was familiar. So I want to take a moment to welcome Mr. Thompson, a familiar face. First, I'd like to welcome Mr. Thompson to the district. You remember me, Mr. Thompson, right? I think the last time that I saw Mr. Thompson was at a school board meeting just like this, where you sat by blank-faced and watched as my colleagues and students begged for my job. Do you remember that, Mr. Thompson? I sure do. What I remember most is you sitting there with a blank expression on your face as my colleagues and students of mine stood up and begged for my job. That was both one of the proudest and saddest moments of my life. So you can imagine my surprise when your name was mentioned today in regard to the new superintendent position. Like a ghost from the past, I was immediately brought back to one of the most trying times of my life, when you stood by and allowed teachers like myself to be strung along on temporary contracts year after year, sometimes for as long as 7 years, with no hope of a permanent position in sight. You stood by as jobs were cut, as funding was cut, as class sizes grew. And as teachers struggled to survive. It was clear then and is clear now that you only serve as a means to maintain the status quo in our district. So I ask you, Mr. Thompson, how will you be any different than your predecessors, who have run this district into the ground, who have shown little to no regard for our teachers, and who make decisions that are harmful for our students? How will you set yourself apart from a legacy of financial mismanagement and misguided policy decisions that consistently cause more harm than good? You just got a $50K raise and a 3-year contract, while teachers in your district are getting pink slipped left and right. Support services are being cut, class sizes are at an all-time high, cost of living and health care continue to rise, and district illustrates what little regard we have and respect for its teachers with a whopping 1% offer. So I challenge you, Mr. Thompson, how are you going to be any different than your predecessors? Welcome to the district. You've got a lot of work cut out for you.
Next speaker is Colleen Hayslett. After Colleen Hayslett is Michael Gardner.
I'm going to start by throwing out one word: recall. All of you can be recalled. You were voted in, you can be taken out by those same people. I hope everybody in this community is listening. Regarding these new contracts, or old contracts where they're just leveled up and all that other propaganda you want to put out there, this is what that number looks like for 1 year. This is 1 year for these people to work here, including the new superintendent who has not shown they can do the job yet. Take that times 3 years that these contracts are for, and you get this large number on the bottom. I'm not even going to try to read it. Okay? But I guarantee you this is in the millions of dollars. Going by the level 3, the media teacher salary on your propaganda at the district website, the teacher B, this is about laid off teachers, 8 laid off teachers' jobs. This number could be put back into the classroom where the people who actually work with students instead of sitting in this air-conditioned building not knowing what's going on. I hope you have started making those worksheet copies because we're going to go.
Next speaker, Michael Gardner. After Michael Gardner is Roland Valina.
I just accidentally deleted my speech, so I apologize. So I remember what I was going to say because it was important to me. And the first thing is that in my religion, we fight with love. And I love the people on the board. And because I love you, I'm going to fight you by telling the truth. And what you're doing is wrong. It's wrong because it's hurting students. A lot of the students that we work with are really on the edge of the light. Where they're going to be in 10 years, they have potential for great harm or great good. And what they need are professional teachers who don't just care, but are good at their jobs. And what you're doing is chasing them away because they can't afford to stay. You have to fight for the students, and they need professional teachers, and that does cost money. You know, because you are attracting the best superintendents and administration by offering money. So use that principle for teachers because students need quality teachers. Thank you.
Next speaker, Roland Valina. After Roland Valina is Angelica Canellis.
So I'd like to first share the sentiment of some of my fellow teachers here that I do not feel any hate for you guys personally. I still go to church with Miss Canless every Sunday, and I'm glad to go to church with her every Sunday. But according to this contract, Section 3 compensation, it says $257,000 annually. Let me tell you what $257,000 annually is. That is $26,300 more than the Vice President of the United States of America. That is the average upper middle class salary for a person living in the Philippines. The Associate Justice of the Supreme Court makes only $12,600 more. The Speaker of the House, Miss Nancy Pelosi, who represents the District of San Francisco, makes $33,500 less. And the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court only makes $2,000 more than the current, what you're offering the superintendent. Let me explain what $257,000 a year is. That is $14,000 a month after taxes, including mortgage interest deduction for a $1.3 million house. To put that into perspective, you can afford the most expensive item at Texas Roadhouse for 3 people 3 times a day, every day for a whole month, and still have $7,000 left over. That is money that could be better spent fixing our bathrooms at Logan, which was mentioned 3 times at the WASC report. Students at Logan every day have to do some sort of weird ballet dance just to get some privacy in the bathroom. Yet we can afford giving a superintendent more money than 4 of the highest positions in the country. Some of these people sitting in those positions are almost 80 years old. I don't think that guy is 80 years old. Thank you. Please reconsider this contract and consider offering a better wage that is more considerable to his position, which is he's not here. He hasn't been here a long time, has he?
Next speaker, Angelica Canales. After Angelica Canales is Joe Angeles.
Good evening. I thought about not coming tonight. I missed my son's baseball game, my daughter's softball game, and of course the Warriors are tipping off in about 15 minutes. I thought to myself, they heard us at the last meeting. It might not have seemed like they were listening. They may have sat there with blank, stony faces or checked their cell phones, but we put it all out there. They heard from teachers, parents, and even the students themselves. But then I received an email. Was it another New Haven News bargaining update, another long, misleading missive intending to confuse the community? No. Strangely enough, the district did not put out an email blast to announce that the school board would be approving 4 new contracts tonight. I had to ask myself, are you all so completely out of touch with reality that it did not occur to you how ridiculous it is to offer 3 district administrators a brand new 3-year contract with a pay increase for 2019-2020 when their current contracts have not even expired, all while refusing to offer teachers a fair contract that would provide the resources and opportunities that our students need to succeed? I keep hearing from the district that school budgets are difficult to understand and require a 3-year projection. Well, there is one person, our chief business officer, who is paid over $200,000 a year to understand the budget and project out over 3 years. If that person did not see this financial crisis coming, then that person is incompetent to oversee the district's budget. And if that person did see this coming and proceeded to negotiate and approve raises for herself and other top district administrators while offering teachers 0%, then that person needs to answer to this community. School board, you folks have approved all of these choices. You share responsibility in leading us into this fabricated financial crisis. It is time to answer to your community. If our new superintendent is being offered $257,000 and needs 3 assistant superintendents to run our district, we have a big problem on our hands.
Final speaker is Joe Angeles.
Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, I think so. And again, members of the board, district staff, Dr. Smith, teachers here today, I am really at a loss of words for what you just heard. But I'm going to say some things a little more reality. Like you know, my thing is very much a reality-based look. And so I'm just going to tell you again. Last board meeting we met, I said it was a day of reckoning. The reckoning is there's 95% of teachers say we're going to strike. 95%. That's the day of reckoning that's before you. Tonight is another thing that you need to contemplate. Today is a defining moment for you as leaders of this community. And I say that because it's an odd thing to say, and we heard the propaganda. My thing, because I love this, I love a circus, it's smoke and mirrors. Smoke and mirrors. Because for a whole year, you made pretty sideshows about this crazy budget. It's in a crazy place. We got no money. We have no money. We ain't going to get no money. So you quit asking for a whole year. You've been telling us. But miraculously, smoke and mirrors, you found $2 million in less than 2 months. This only happened in 2 months' time, the so-called superintendent search. We already have an idea back in the day when the same type of board said, you know what, let's not have a superintendent, let's have a co-superintendent. And we survived, and we survived very well. We are still a place of excellence in teaching, but now it's at a place that we can't even understand what that means anymore because we're not valued. You are worth 0, teachers, and I'll say it again, I'll say it all year. So the problem with this, like Mr. Snelling said, it's the problem of money, which now we're like the dang corporate greed. You are now 1%ers. You need to define yourself actually as community leaders. We don't need any more corporate greed. Saving money, like Mr. Snelling said, for what? That money's supposed to go to students. That $2 million you found in a dang month could have survived all those 25 cuts you just put out. Imagine that. If you had the audacity of leadership to go against the grain of what's been told to you, we would not even be in this dilemma here. This thing about the superintendent contract is way out there. And like the other teacher said, Mr. Thompson, you got a chore ahead of you. Because obviously you're coming into the New Haven circus. Cirque de l'Oreille. Whatever that word is, it's coming. And I hate to say it, this is a defining moment. I'll end with this comment. There's Member Chima, Member Canlis. I was on the board, on the interview board, when you both pledged that you believe in equity compensation package for all. And there's no way you can give a contract tonight and you have not given it to the teachers. So I'm saying to you, you've got some defining moments yourself to do. Look in the mirror and look who's looking back, because you see the reflection right here. And that reflection says, we need someone who's going to answer our call and not kind of diffuse it. We don't need no more smoke and mirrors. We are much more intelligent than that. Please do some real defining of that reflection. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers. Moving on to the next action item. Section 8, action items, Resolution 8.1, Resolution number 035-1819, Declaration of Need for Fully Qualified Educators. Mr. McNamara.
Superintendent Cower, members of the board, and Superintendent Smith. The Declaration of Need is an annual request that we make to CTC. In the event that we have a hard-to-fill position, usually mid-year, usually in special ed, we have to be able to have this on file with CTC in order to give emergency permits, to issue an emergency permit. If we don't make this request, then mid-year we cannot hire a position, like in special ed, then we cannot issue an emergency permit. So I ask that you approve this waiver tonight.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
0%.
No. Are there any? Oh, may I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution first, and then we can go into any discussion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on this?
None.
Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. Moving on to the next item in the action items section, 8.2, resolution number 042-1819 to initiate a transition to a by-trustee area election system commencing with the 2020 governing board election and statement of intent to seek a waiver of election requirements from the State Board of Education.
As the board was made aware in a different correspondence, we received a demand letter from MALDEF demanding that we go away from the at-large system of vote into a trustee area approach in New Haven. Here tonight to share the presentation on the California Voting Rights Act is Peter Fagan from the F3 law firm. Peter, take it away.
Thank you, and thank you board members, thank you administration, and thank you teachers for being here to, I know you're probably not here to listen to this presentation, but I get to present it, so thank you. As was mentioned, the district has received a demand letter from MALDEF regarding its election system and the use of at-large election system to elect board members. And what I will do tonight is do a quick run-through of the California Voting Rights Act that is mentioned in that demand letter and how it comes to bear on that demand and the next steps that you can take to comply with the demand and put the district inside the safe harbor language of the California Voting Rights Act. So with that, we'll move on to the California Voting Rights Act has been around for 16 years. And even still today, is probably close to 50% of school districts, maybe even a little more, that are still have their board members elected through at-large voting on the entire district-wide. The California Voting Rights Act, when it was enacted, includes the phrase that it prohibits at-large elections when that system of election impairs the ability of a protected class to elect candidates of its choice. It's basically, the term is called racially polarized voting. And if a particular minority group supports a candidate or a cause on the ballot and is unable to influence that election in any way, then an outcome of racially polarized voting can be found. And if that's the case, then at-large elections are prohibited. One of the interesting things about the California Voting Rights Act is most of you have probably heard of the Federal Voting Rights Act. So there's a federal law. The California Voting Rights Act is much broader and much easier to prove a case. Under the Federal Voting Rights Act, in order to prove a violation, there has to be some type of intent to violate someone's rights. That's not called for in the California Voting Rights Act. There doesn't have to be any intent at all that the agency was trying to discriminate or lessen the impact of an individual's vote. The intent of the legislature, it clearly appears that they intend eventually, over time, that all public agencies will have elections by trustee areas. So, meaning that, like Congress, each individual trustee will be elected from a particular area where they live and only elected by the voters in that area. The other thing that's interesting about this law is that a huge sledgehammer, so to speak, is hanging over the head of every public agency that still has at-large voting. And that sledgehammer comes in the form of the law providing a recovery for attorney's fees and expert witness fees for the party or plaintiff who brings the action or demand letter against the public agency. And if the district were to fight and win, the district does not get the same benefit. So you would not be able to recover attorney's fees from the other side if you were to fight it and win. Here's an example of some of the cases that have been litigated around California and the amount of fees that the public agencies have had to pay to opposing counsel. Remember, this is over on top of the fees that they would pay their own attorneys for representing them. Hanford Joint Union High School District, relatively small amount at $110. $3 million for the city of Modesto, $1.2 million for Madera Unified, $500,000 for Tulare Healthcare District. That's just getting started. Then we move into the city of Palmdale case. Some of you may have heard of the city of Palmdale case. As I mentioned, almost 50% of the districts have converted to by-trustee area elections because of the potential for these attorney's fees being faced with, the public agency being faced with those. Palmdale, the city of Palmdale decided to fight. They took it all the way through a trial. They lost. They took it on an appeal and lost. And then ultimately settled post-appeal, and they paid $4.5 million plus interest to the opposing party. And then paid their own attorneys about 1.5 to conduct the litigation as well. The one that's ongoing right now, and this is the one that's received probably most of the media attention over the last couple of years, is the city of Santa Monica. And they have also decided to fight, and so far they've lost at the trial, and they're in the midst of contemplating an appeal, and they've already spent over $5 million in their defense, and if they were to settle at this point, typically the plaintiff's attorney's fees are double what the agency is paying their own counsel. So you could expect to see a settlement for approximately $10 million at this point. So, and given that school districts aren't floating in a lot of extra money, it's typically not a fight that school districts want to take on. So, what does it look like? As I said, the California Voting Rights Act provides one safe harbor, and that is to convert to by-trustee area elections and then hold elections based on that system. And as I mentioned, that is when a board member lives in an area and is voted for by the other members of the public that live in that area. So in essence, the district would be divided into 5 approximately equal population areas, and then a board member would run from each area and would be elected by those voters from that area. Tinkering with your current system is something that most board members, as I said, I've handled probably more of these than just about anybody in the state. And I always get the question, well, can we change ours slightly? Maybe have 3 at large and, or 2 at large and 3 by area, Or can we go to cumulative voting? Or can we do some variety of different type of an election? And the courts have consistently held that the only safe harbor to protect the agency from the attorney's fees that I've been mentioning is to agree to move to trustee areas across the board. About probably 2.5 years ago, this California Voting Rights Act was updated. Some really welcome changes were made to the law. And the most welcome change was that the plaintiff fee reimbursement portion of the law was no longer open-ended. But the big if with that is that if you convert to by trustee area elections within a compressed time period, basically from the time you adopt a resolution to make the change, you have to make that change complete within 90 days. And that involves 2 public hearings before you even mention maps and bring maps to the public, then 3 more public hearings after the maps have been drafted by the demographer, and then an adoption of the map, and then the county Committee on School District Organization has to take the final vote. They will come out to the district and adopt, typically they will adopt the map that the school board has chosen. But with that, it capped attorney's fees at $30,000. So if you meet that timeline by passing a resolution tonight and then within 90 days making these changes and holding all the public hearings and community meetings as well, then the most that you would be asked to pay would be $30,000. If you don't pass the resolution within the 45-day timeline, which we're right up against, from receiving the demand letter, or if we don't complete the transition within the timeline, then the plaintiff is free to file a lawsuit, and then the cap on attorney's fees goes away. So that was the significant change in the law, which was obviously welcomed by many public agencies. So, assuming for a second, I'm not speaking for you, obviously, you have to make the decision, but if you were to make the decision to move to by trustee area elections, what would the next steps look like? First, you pass a resolution. As I mentioned, you have a 45-day window from the time you receive the demand letter, and you do not have another board meeting scheduled between now and the expiration of the 45 days. And so you're kind of up against it right now. You would then hold 2 pre-map public hearings. And what I mean by pre-map is that this whole process involves a map of the district, dividing it into 5 equal population areas. And a demographer will come in and do that. But the law requires that you hold 2 pre-map hearings beforehand. So it would be at a regular board meeting or a special board meeting. You'd have a public hearing where you announce what you're doing, explain, the members of the public could come, hear about it, comment if they would like. And then once you've had those 2 pre-map public hearings, the demographer will put together draft maps for you all to consider that will then be shared with the public through the public meetings and future public hearings. That's the drawing of the maps, and the drawing of the maps would be based on several criteria. What I have is a short list of some of the criteria here, and it's worth mentioning. You can't violate the U.S. Constitution, obviously. The equal population is important. It's population. It's not population of eligible voters or registered voters. It's just straight population. So if you have, say, 75,000 people in your district, and I don't know if that's the case, but if you do, you divide that by 5, and hopefully the districts would be within a very close number of the same population. Now, there's some variances allowed. Cases have allowed up to 10% variance, but typically the demographers that do this are able to get it closer to 5%, which is very good. Keeping local communities of interest, and that's one of the important things about having your public hearings as well as your public meetings out around the school district, so that members of the public can come and share their thoughts about the way they think the trustee areas should be drawn. And you can't favor or discriminate against a sitting board member. So, for example, I don't have a clue where any of you live, but let's say all 5 of you live in one area, and you divide the district into 5 areas, only one of you would be able to represent that area. But the thing that is taken into consideration is that no sitting board member who has been elected by a vote of the people will have their term shortened. Everyone serves out their term, but then depending on where you live, you may be able to run in a district. But if you're live in a district where 2 or 3 of you might happen to live, you may not be able to. Or you could run, but you wouldn't all be elected, obviously, because only one person would come from that area. I don't need to run through the entire list of the criteria, but as I mentioned, then you hold 3 public hearings following once you have the draft of the maps. And once the board picks a map, then the County Committee on School District Organization comes out to this district, reviews the process. We would put on a presentation as to what has been done, the resolution that was passed, the map that was chosen, the amount of community feedback that was involved in the process, and then the county committee has the ultimate authority to choose the map. Now, having said, I've done this, I don't know how many times now, probably close to 70 districts. 2 occasions have I seen the County Committee on School District Organization choose a map different than what a board chose. So that means it can happen. It's very rare. The key is that you have a plan for public participation and you consider the public feedback when you're drawing those boundaries and picking a map. Under the law as it currently stands, anytime there's a change in the method of election of elected officials, that change in election process has to go to a vote of the people. So the way this would work, absent a waiver that I'm going to talk about, would be you'd pick a map and say and adopt the resolution, say we're going to move to by-trustee area elections, and then that would go on the ballot at the next election, and the people would vote, say, yes, we want to change to by-trustee area elections, or no, we don't. But given the fact that we're talking about racially polarized voting and the California Voting Rights Act, a waiver process has been set up through the California Department of Education. You petition them for a waiver, and this would come at a later date if you decide to move forward. And they typically, I will say, in 100% of the cases that I've seen, they will grant the waiver. The reason they grant the waiver is that there's a cost for an election, and again, school districts don't have a whole lot of money right now, so you can avoid that cost. The other thing is that should this go to a vote of the people and the decision be voted down and say, no, we like our at-large elections, we're going to keep them, it opens you up to a lawsuit, and the results from that election would then be Exhibit A in the lawsuit against the district, forcing you to change. So there's really good legal reasons and logical reasons why the waiver is always granted. The final steps, once this Committee on School District Organization at the county has finalized your map, then we file that map with the Registrar of Voters, and then you hold an election under the new system, and that would be in the 2020 round of elections. Now, obviously, if someone was just elected, they would serve till 2022. I'm assuming you all have 4-year terms, but the people whose terms are up in 2020, part of this process is that you select which areas come up for election first. So if there's 2 or 3 of you, then 2 or 3 seats would be up in 2020, and then the rest of them would be up in 2022. One other thing that you should know, I guess I'm mentioning it here, just like Congress, every 10 years, the boundaries have to be withdrawn, or redrawn, I'm sorry, not withdrawn, redrawn, based on the new census information. Now, a demographer will look at the last census as the basis for drawing the maps, but then if there is other data that can be collected and there's been high population growth in one part of your community or so like that, then they will draw the maps accordingly. But you need to know, as soon as the 2020 census is over, you'll have to go through the process again to redraw the maps. And then those maps will last for 10 years, just like the congressional districts and any other election districts. So, final thoughts on this. The one thing, or several things, I guess, not just one thing to be aware of. The concern that many people have with by-trustee area elections for a school board is that if you're not all being voted on by the entire public or the entire population of your district, you may have loyalties to just a particular school site or just a particular neighborhood that elects you. It does not change the legal requirements for each of the board members. You still have a fiduciary duty to the entire district. You still have a duty of loyalty to the entire district, and you have a duty to represent the entire district. But those are things that will need to be taken into consideration as to how you tell the demographer that you want your trustee area boundaries drawn. Whether you want them to cut across many attendance boundaries or to follow attendance boundaries. So those are things that we can talk about later should you decide to move forward. So with that, I'm willing to take any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fagan. We're going to go ahead and actually make the motion first, and then we'll take questions. So may I have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 042-1819 to initiate a transition to a by-trustee area election system commencing with the 2020 Governing Board election and statement of intent to seek a waiver of the election requirement, from the State Board of Education.
So moved.
I second.
Thank you. Any discussion on that or questions for Mr. Fagan?
Not so much a question. I support this. I think it's a great idea. I guess the question that we will have to kind of figure out as a staff is how are we going to communicate and outreach to the public to make sure that we get great participation and engagement from the community, because we'll want to make sure that, we have representation from everywhere. So we need to put together a good communication and outreach plan to figure out how to reach everybody.
Agreed. Any other questions or comments?
No questions, and I understand, and 90 days, and that's very tough. That's working together.
Yeah.
So I agree with Lance, as he mentioned, public's involvement, especially because we are towards the end of the school year, and then, so 30 days from now will be May 30th, and then 90 days from then will be almost like summer vacation time, and our plan to go to the maybe sites, PTAs, or I don't know how will that work, so we have to work on that. I do have a little bit of clarification, so can you define the protected class in this one, and also the county committee on the school
district organization?
So who comprises that?
Okay, it's part of your county office of education, and typically it's made up of a bunch of different members of school boards and from around the county. So I take it that none of you are sitting on that board at this time, or you would probably know about that. But typically it is made up of just one member from various districts from around the county that are asked to sit on that. And then there's an administrator at the county office of education who we work through to make sure that the presentation and with all of the history of the outreach efforts that a district has made and the map that was chosen and why it was chosen is part of that presentation. But it's part of the county office of education, and that committee is made up of other school board members from around the county. There may be some other public officials, like city elected people as well, but typically it's the majority are school board members.
So it's already formed, it's already there?
Yes,
and
it's
always
already
there?
formed, correct.
That structure is okay. So the protected class, if you can define a little bit?
A protected class is what, there's lots of cases on protected class. Typically, well, the demand letter came from MALDEF.
Right.
And so MALDEF is making the claim that Hispanic or Latino members of the public are not being adequately represented because they would favor candidates who they're not able to get elected under the current system. So for your purposes, that is the protected class that we're talking about. But under the terms of the California Voting Rights Act, the protected class in several of the cases with all those attorney's fees that I mentioned up there have made clear that it's not limited to any particular race or nationality or ethnic group. It's available, the protection of this law is available to any group that is in a minority in a community where they do not believe that they have the opportunity to elect the candidates of their choice. Now, you need to know that making a change to by trustee area election may not make that group happy either, because they still may not be able to elect the candidates of their choice. But the legislature, in their wisdom, said there's only one safe harbor, and you're protected from liability if you make the change. They're not worried about the end result, and there have been many situations where there was minority representation on a school board, they switched to by trustee area elections, the minority members were no longer there after the next round of elections. So it doesn't always work out the way it's planned, but the public agency is protected from liability by making the change.
For defining purposes, so is there any percentage, like in this letter, they have mentioned 20% of the MALDEF, population. Is there any defined percentage to define a protected class? Like 10% will comprise a protected class, or 15% or 20%?
No. No, there isn't. But typically what a demographer will look at, and what the courts will look at in the drawing of the maps, is if there's a protected class, and given that this is MALDEF and we're looking at Latino or Hispanic origination, then we will look at where does that minority live? Are they concentrated in a particular area, or are they spread out throughout the district? If there's a concentration in a particular area, then the demographer will try to draw a map that will enhance their ability to influence an election. They may not get to 50%. They may go from 20% of the total to 35% in their trustee area, but their chance of influencing an election will have increased, which is the point of the law.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Good questions. Member Canlis?
No, they've been answered already. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Good discussion on here. So thank you, and I trust the staff will be putting together a timeline as to when those meetings will take place, and then we will get that out to the community and work on a strong communication plan, so that way community can actually take part and participate.
Great.
Thank you.
We have a draft timeline and a communication plan to start, a template to start from, and then you can tailor it out to your community. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to restate the motion on the table?
Oh, sorry, yes, of course, that would help, right? Yeah, so may I have a motion and a second to actually...
Point of order, motion's already on the table.
No, it's also on the table,
So
just
that was a discussion point,
Roll
yes,
call.
of course. So may I have a roll call, please?
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. And the next action item we have on the agenda is 8.3, appointment of the superintendent and approval of the superintendent contract, Dr. John Thompson. I would like to open it up to the board for any comments you would like to make about maybe the process, your experience. And I know we had several stakeholders and community members, and our student participated as well. So if you'd like to share anything before we take the vote.
I would just like to say that I'm going to abstain from this vote, and that on behalf of students, I request that we notify the students about the new superintendent along with his credentials and resume.
Thank you.
I have no questions or comments.
Okay, thank you. Member Wong?
No, I'm fine. Yeah, I have no comments. And
Okay, thank you. Member Chima?
No comments.
Okay, great. And I think I already stated earlier that I want to thank all the stakeholders that came and participated. It was a lengthy process, as was expected, but we came out with a great choice in my mind. I think we're going to do wonderful. So I'm happy to announce that Mr. John Thompson is in the room today. So with that, may I have a motion and a second to appoint and approve the superintendent contract for Dr. John Thompson?
so moved. Let me second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? None. Then roll call, please.
I abstain.
Aye.
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 Aye, thank you. With that, may I have, I'm going to actually request the board if we can do a 5-minute recess, and then we'll resume in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for being in your places.
All right, if we can make our way back. We like to resume the meeting and finish off the board's business. Member Chima, can I have you come back to your seat?
Ms. Chima, please come back to the dais. Ms. Chima.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started since we, yeah. All right, we're going to move on to the consent agenda items. We have several on. Are there any items that members would like to pull for additional information, clarification, or a separate vote?
I do. Hang on
Okay.
just a second. I'm pulling my, give me just a second. So items 9.32 to 9.34 for the contracted employees.
Okay.
Pull for separate vote.
Pull for separate vote, okay. Are there, Member Wong, do you have any items you would like to pull for a separate vote or information?
No.
Or clarification, okay. Member Chima?
They already has been mentioned by Lance.
Okay, Member Canlis?
I would like to pull 9.32 and 9.33 to be tabled for another meeting for further review.
Okay. Since those have been pulled, I do have additional that I want just clarification on, not necessarily pulled for separate vote. And these are item number 9.8, which is the award bid for the purchase of a refrigerated food delivery vehicle. And then we can go into the 9.2 to 9.34. I believe that is Ms. Haldeman, right? Okay. So I just need a quick clarification as to the refrigerated food delivery vehicle. My understanding was that we have a food center where our food is cooked and then distributed to each site. So are we looking for a vehicle that's going to be transporting frozen food from those sites to school sites, or is this for a different purpose?
So this is actually replacing the vehicle that we have currently, that we've had for nearly 20 years.
Okay.
We distribute food to our elementary schools from the central kitchen. We don't do it to the middle schools and we don't do it for the secondary schools. So this is a replacement for the vehicle that we have, which would be illegal to drive after December of this year. And therefore, we went through this process of competitive bidding.
So it is a replacement of that same vehicle?
Yes.
Okay. And my other question is, since we do talk about often, wanting healthier choices for our students, especially younger ones, are there any alternatives or, alternatives to frozen food? I mean, since these meals are cooked in our centralized kitchen and being distributed, can there be freshly prepared food versus frozen food for them?
The good news is in the last couple of months, we've actually changed up and tested different menu items. We will be incorporating a lot of taste tests this coming summer because we want to introduce different things this coming school year. So we're continuing to explore choices. One of the limitations that we have is actually the facilities that we have. We're not able to do a lot of that, and therefore we were limited in terms of our choices, but it's certainly something that we've done. We actually installed some ovens in our secondary level this past year.
Okay, wonderful. And then just my last comment, I know in the past you had brought it up that, or we have asked as well, is when can we get a presentation from our food facility services? And also maybe a possible tour, and it sounds like there's going to be new menu, so I think it would be good to kind of get an update on that. So
yes, we will.
You can let us know when that's going to be.
Yes.
Okay, so that is all I have in terms of, so do we, okay. I think we can do a discussion on 9.32 before we pull it for a separate vote, or can we do the voting on all the other consent agenda items and then leave that out for discussion? Okay. All right, so let me pull up my consent items. So with that, may I have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items 9.1 through 9.31?
31, you mean?
And 34.
No. Well,
Because he has a,
Lance wanted to have a separate vote on that. So 9.1 to 9.31.
Yeah.
May I have a motion and a second on that?
Second.
Who was seconded?
I'm second.
Okay, thank you. Discussion on that? Roll call, please. Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. So with the remaining three consent agenda items, so I'm going to let Lance speak on 9.32, and then the others members, they have also asked to pull that for a separate vote or for a table.
Okay, so today I am not in a position to support 9.32 through 9.34. A couple reasons. As it's written right now, I don't understand currently the material impact of the title change. We went from a chief position to an assistant superintendent position. I went on the website today looking for job descriptions. I believe there's a lot of process that needs to be done before we actually make that change. It may be material, it may not be material, but one thing that it is a title change. So we should probably get our job descriptions in order on the website so that it matches the job titles that are on the contract. Additionally, we should give a little bit of context to understand how we arrived at these numbers. And also, so those are the two big pieces that kind of inform how I'm thinking about this vote.
Thank you. And are you referring to just 9.32 or applies to 9.33 and 34 as well?
32, 34,
And
32, 33, and 34.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer? Okay. May I, any additional, I know Member Chima, you had also asked to pull those out. Did you
Yes,
have
all
comments
three.
on that? All three? Okay.
Actually, Linda has asked us to table these 9.32 and 9.33. I would like to make a motion to table all three of them.
Okay.
But I don't know, let's see, if there is any second, instead of just having a different vote, if there is any board member can second it to table all three 9.32, because 9.32 and 33, they're already, there is a motion from Linda to table them, and I'm adding 9.32 to table all three of them.
And I think, if I know this correctly, Lance has already asked for a separate vote on that. So we will be voting separately on it. So whether we table it or whether we, I think we can.
I think if we agree to table it, then there is no need to have a separate vote. So there will be an opportunity for us in the future to vote after we have our questions answered. Like
I'm
you
fine with
mentioned.
tabling it,
Yeah.
but as it's written currently in the agenda, I
Yeah.
will be not supporting it.
So that means he has second to table it.
Okay, so you're asking to
So-
table all three then?
All three, and
Okay.
then if we can, because there is a motion and there is a second, if we can have a roll call to carry on that motion to table these three agenda items.
So let me ask Member Canlis if she has, her reasoning for wanting to table 3.2 and 3.3.
Yeah.
Yes, 32 and 33, because I need more information and a review on those.
Okay. So I actually also agree with the other two board members because I feel like I just don't have enough information on these to really feel confident to put vote, not just on one or two, but all three of them because they are very similar in nature. And I think it'll do us some service if we have a little bit background information. And as it stands, I think there were some things that were unclear. So it just makes sense for me to table all three at the same time.
Can we restate the motion on the table?
So the motion.
Before
Yeah.
we do that, could you please be more specific in terms of what additional information you would like?
So may I ask Member Nishihira to begin, and then we'll come down this way.
Member Nisha has already been specific.
Okay.
Job descriptions and website, but
Sure.
the rest of you who are objecting, what specific information would you like?
All right, so I don't know if, Jeff, you had any objections to it, or if you have any comments, and then we'll move down the line that way.
Okay, I reviewed, understand and pretty well. I just only have one questions, and this contract is, the confidential or can be, be the public, the information. So I just want to understand it.
It is public information.
It's a public information, right?
Yes.
It's right there on the.
It's
That's
not,
why
yes,
it's
that's
here.
I aware.
It's
Yeah,
public
okay.
information, yeah. Okay, Member Chima.
So my reasoning for this one is because previously we used to get the old contracts and then the new proposed contract so that we can compare what we are changing, which terms we are changing. So this time that opportunity was not available to us. So I have to ask for it today that I would like to see the previous contract so that I can find out what are the changes and why we have changed those. So we did not have this, I didn't have that information, so I feel like I need to get that information before I approve that.
Okay, sure. Yes, Member Wong.
Okay, and I think some teachers and concerned about this one. We think we should agree with the Chima and talk about it. We maybe can do the comparison, so let the public understand what we did for the new contract. Even I understand that the contract is not finished, why we need a new contract. So, and people will know what we're doing, what we're voting. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Canlis?
In addition, just to know how we arrived at those numbers.
Okay. So for me, I echo some of the sentiments and the same questions that they raised, but I think for me, the real thing was I do not believe the Me Too clause should be automatically applied. There needs to be some rationality and some justification to those raises. And it might be as simple as satisfactory performance evaluation, but there needs to be some measure in place that will allow for accountability. So that was my biggest reason. And then the other parts are for the CBO's contract, I found some typos. And I think if we're going to make this a public and official contract, then we need to have a very clean contract. And I'm referring to, there's interchangeable, his and her, and the name is used interchangeably. So I think we just need to clean it out because the former CBO was a male. So there's still
And
some
year also.
references to that, yeah.
2020.
And I can give you exact pages where it's on. It's under the expense paragraph on page 3 of 6. And under the termination section C and D, page 4 of 6 on the CBO's contract. I also had questions about Scott's, the CAO. his contract, but I was able to get an explanation as to how that number or his salary was derived. So I think for now, that will serve the purpose, but I still feel that the information that I am requesting, especially around the Me Too clause, pertains to all three. So for that reason, I'm gonna ask if we can table this for a later time. So if that, yes, Member Chima.
I would like to add another 2 questions because I asked our superintendent why these contracts came today on the agenda. So I was told that because we want to have, because there is still another year left. So I was told that it's kind of, in alignment. In my opinion, as a single board member, is that we don't need to have alignment because in case we buy our superintendent and then everybody else has the same timelines. I know we can stagger it, but still there is a potential that all 4 can be, gone away at the same time. So it's my personal thinking that, they should not be aligned. Let's see how we can stagger them once we have the opportunity to discuss that in the closed session.
Yeah.
And the second thing is that if we are locking them for another 3 years, today, for example, there are some changes at the legislature, California legislature for the STRS participation, where they have, they're trying to curtail some pension costs and everything. So CalSTRS, so they're making some changes. But if somebody is locked in the contract already, so they will not be able to apply those changes to the members who already are in the contract. So that kind of, limits our ability to, in a way, tweak our contracts if we need to. So for that reason, I think we need to table it as well.
Okay. So does that help you get a list going at least? So I know that May is going to be a difficult month for us to bring this back on the agenda. So will June be a month we can bring this back?
Point of clarification, as long as you raise that question. Ms. Chima said I talked about alignment when she questioned me about these. It wasn't so much alignment as in all of those contracts, there's a 12-month clause.
Right.
So making sure that the 12-month clause stays in force was more important to me. So I just want to clarify and go on the record that that was the reason for bringing the contracts tonight. It had very little to do with the alignment, but it's important that you take them as a package. And so, well, so that was my rationale.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I said. And I think to all of you who asked me, I made it very clear that it was about keeping the 12-month clause in force.
Yeah, no, we do understand, and also we have 5, 6 brains to think about it. So, then we just need to have more time. So, President Kaur, you just mentioned you were asking them when we need to bring them on the agenda. You don't have to ask them. It's your purview that whenever you want to bring them on the agenda, you can
Yeah, I
bring
think
it
the reason
back.
I'm proposing June is because May, most likely, there's going to be few
I know,
members
that
out.
can be discussed
So I would
later.
prefer that we bring it when the whole board is here. So that takes us into a June meeting. So whichever the first June meeting that we have, so they can prepare it. June 4th, you said? Okay, so June 4th meeting, if we can have preferably much of this information, answered or given to us prior, so that way we can make a better decision on these or make changes as needed. So with that, I would like to ask for a motion and a second to table consent agenda items 9.32, 9.33, and 9.34.
So moved.
Motion was already on the table. We were discussion, so it's
Okay,
just a roll
so-
call only at this time.
Okay, so we had a motion again, motion made, can someone second?
The motion on the table only had 31 and 32.
Yeah, so
Did
now,
not yet have 33, or,
34.
yes, did not yet have 34.
so Lance just made the motion, can I get a second on that?
Okay, second.
Thank you, discussion. No, roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. With no further business, this meeting is adjourned.